Alrighty, guys, what is up? It is Stu, and it is another episode of I don't know what the fuck with this, because I don't know if it's going to be a podcast. I don't know. So it might be a podcast, or it might just be this video. I don't know what it is. And make sure you're always looking at the lens, not the monitor up top. Okay?
Cool. I'll try not to look at myself.
That's right. So I've got me and Deuce here, and we are going to be going over a high-level overview as to how we think about programming with our tempo training model in a group setting. So many of you guys have sent, those of you who applied for the licensee, those of you who are just kind of curious, interested, because maybe you're playing with tempo as well. You've sent us questions in DMs asking, okay, how do you think about this? I get, you're into tempo, but what's actually the science? Show me what is the thought process behind there? And while today our goal is mainly to do a much more high level overview of this, because this is part of the secret sauce that only our licensees will get. So there will be elements here where we will only be going to a superficial layer and we will not be going any deeper, because that is reserved for those who will actually be prescribing this in a group setting. But we still, I don't believe in IP really. I think this is something we can talk about at a high level. So let's go ahead and kick this thing off. When we're programming a week here, and when I say we, I really mean when he's programming a week here, you kind of zoom out and you think about a couple things. So, it's Sunday. You're sitting there and what do you wear? Pajamas, boxers? What do you sit on the couch and do?
Yeah, sweatpants. Sweatpants or shorts, really short shorts.
With Taco Bell stains.
Of course.
And you're going to go sit there and you're going to program out a week of workouts. Zoom out for everybody at a macro level. And what are some of the things you're thinking of to kick this thing off?
Yeah, so we start off, we have 3 styles. So build, sprint, grind, which you've talked on numerous times. And then it's basically kind of setting those onto which day we're going to do which workouts, right? And how we're going to go about this, whether it's going to be more of a bias towards grinds or more of a bias towards sprints. Builds are the majority of the workouts. So that's probably, I would say, takes up 60% of the week is going to be a build. But it's really those odd days, do we have 2 grinds or 2 sprints?
Yeah, so essentially it's a bi-weekly program. It's one has a grind twice in that week, a singular sprint, and then 3 builds. Mm-hmm. And for those of you guys, keeping up with the math at home, we're doing this Monday through Saturday, or 6 days of programming. We are not open on Sundays for group classes. And the other one, which, the first model would be let's call it A, and then this would be B, would be 1 grind, 2 sprints, 3 builds, essentially, correct? Mm-hmm. Why do we vary? Why the grinds and the sprints? Why are those the 2 that we're tweaking around, and then the builds are more of the constant 3 days a week?
Yeah, the grinds and the sprints, at least in my mind, and we've talked about this before, they're kind of the outliers. They're on the outside of the spectrum, to where the grinds are the slower move or the slower workouts, the longer efforts, and the sprints are the complete opposite, to where they're a lot more higher effort.
Sure.
So the build kind of fits in the middle, and it's one to where it's like the the Goldilocks and the 3 bears. It's the one that's just right.
Yeah.
So we can put that in a little bit more, and it doesn't feel like, man, all we do in here is just go super slow. And it's not, all I do in here is just go super fast every damn day.
Yeah, I agree. So, those are our 2 outliers. That's the porridge that's too hot, porridge is too cold, kind of to stick with your Goldilocks scenario. That was really good, by the way.
Hey,
that was well done. So that is why, if you're curious at home, that's why the builds are the thing that, ideally when we talk about this, when we have a client coming in their very first class, if we got to pick, it'd probably be a build workout we really want them to see. Yeah. We've obviously been successful in sales having people come in on sprint and grind days. We're just obviously much more thorough in our explanation of the 3 styles and encouraging them to come in on their free week to try the other 2 styles of workouts they didn't see. But to give you guys a high level, what is that week going to be? And it's going to be, again, version 1, which biases towards grinds, or version 2, which biases towards sprints. And that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the week. And then go ahead and break down, because this is a macro, a zoomed out view, but where does your mind go from there?
So then it's just pairing. So we have movement patterns. So we have 7 of them all together. And then I try and take 2 of them and kind of create an overarching theme for that day, right? And so those moving patterns are upper body pulling, whether it's horizontal or vertical, upper body pushing, same thing, horizontal or vertical, hinging, squats, which also includes single legs, core work, hybrid movements, which would be your thrusters, devil presses, things like that. And then obviously the conditioning aspect, so ergs, box jumps, lateral jumps, you name it.
Yeah.
And so from there, now I can create patterns or pairings of these movements, kind of set them on which day I want to do them, and then we can get specific in movements.
Yeah. We've always typically programmed, we typically program a week out generally, sometimes 2 weeks out, but generally it's a week, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I know I've talked with the metabolic guys, they do 52 weeks out, they do the entire program, one big shot, they buckle down for a month or two and just crush that whole thing. Doing a week at a time for us and the practicality of, remember, running a business and understanding that this is not a perfect optimal program for anybody. This is, we have no idea how often they're coming in. Right. We have no idea what people's goals are, all that. Why do you like doing it at a weekly level?
I've always programmed at a weekly level. I've tried programming 3 weeks out before, and it's, at least on my side of things, I'm in here and I'm coaching a lot. So it gives me a better feel of what's going on and how the clients are feeling with these workouts. So I can change things a lot faster. I'm not, cool, let's program this out a month and let's just rock with it. I feel like I just have much more control over it and I can stay more on top of it.
Yeah, I think that nails it down. I've seen gyms like, I program 4 weeks out. I'm like, cool. I bet you the first week of programming, you're probably spot on. The second week, you might tweak and move a few things. Week 3, you're definitely changing a lot of things you didn't think of. And then week 4. And that's the other thing too, is I really love, we were talking about this even, prior to recording this, and we have accepted that in the group training model, we cannot create optimal fitness for people. That's not the purpose of group training. But I truly think doing it a week in advance, I think it allows, it also allows you to be like, oh shit, we totally forgot Martin Luther King Day. We're changing the schedule, which maybe means that we have more people in here than we generally would. Maybe we want to do this kind of a workout versus that. Or, hey, oh my God, we totally planned this Saturday event at the Whitewater Center and we all did rock climbing. Everyone's grip and biceps are smoked, but we programmed 6 weeks ago, Stu, a pull-up thing going on that next day. Like, I think I give some play. And again, as long as the person programming it doesn't mind having that weekly, element of their week where they've got to bias that time for it, and you've obviously made that work, I think it works out perfectly well. And let's kick in here. So these 7 moving patterns, this is something we created even way back in the day when we had a lift and move class. A just move class. We had Thrive. Flex was still going strong. We were still figuring out what would end up being Lift and Move's final version. We look here, we've got our pulling with, we have horizontal and vertical, pushing horizontal, vertical. I think most people understand those. And while we're not going to go into the movements, there's buckets of movements that are attributed to each of these inside of a super secret Excel sheet that you will not be getting. That will be for the licensees, but you guys are smart enough, strength and conditioning coaches, you could probably figure out what goes in these movements, these movement pattern buckets. But like the ones that I really, for me, when I think about you, when I've watched you kind of pair this and the artwork happen, it's looking at how we go ahead and do this. And ultimately, I think, I'll let you write, your handwriting's way better. How is it that we're necessarily thinking of this? There's essentially 2 ways that we're kind of thinking about boiling all these down. And while he's writing, I'll spill it here. We're essentially looking at creating variety, because variety is 100% what your clients come there for, some entertainment, people, right? I understand that if you ran, step-ups and squats and pressing all day, every day for 7 weeks, you'd make some pretty strong athletic individuals. That's not entertaining enough. So we look at variety, and then we're also looking at this element of protagonist and antagonist movements, or you might have thought about these in the past as complementary movements and, friction-based movements. And I'll let you kind of take it from there.
Yeah, and so protagonist movements are just movements that complement each other to where they're not hindering the next movement. So think like back squats and a strict press, right? To where, hey, I do my back squats, my shoulders feel fine, I hit my strict press, I'm good to go.
Or one movement almost creates a rest period for the other movement.
And then antagonist would be movements that do create friction. So pull-ups, ring rows, right?
Sure.
Or front squats into plyo squats.
Yeah. And so that's super important, because when we think of the specific type of intervals that we've created for build, sprints, and grinds, if you have too much of an antagonist protocol in those where people are having to take a ton of rest in between because they just went from a single leg split squat into weighted step ups or something of that degree, those things can fatigue out. I mean, mountain climbers, high volume mountain climbers into some plyometric or some squat dominant base movement, single leg, double leg, whatever it is, that is going to cause that. Those are antagonists. And there's going to now you're forcing more breaks in the flow and the consistency of their movement. And if we're running 6-minute intervals, and you realize, oh shit, it's a 6-minute interval. I'm running 4 movements, and several of them are very antagonist of each other. There's going to be a lot of standing around, and that's not what we want out of the client experience.
Right. Yeah, and then it just gets harder to hold tempos on certain movements too.
100%. Yeah. If you over fatigue them in it, and then it's like, coming around in the last round, like, man, it's a 3-second down tempo. Like, I know, coach, but my fucking legs are jello at this point because you paired all these antagonist movements together. So, we're using some literature terminology here to describe this, but this is how we look at it: protagonist and antagonist movements. How do we? And there's sometimes we want to, let's a la bodybuilding, or we want to superset, and we want to completely have antagonist movements. We want to create that effect, but you are very specific into when do we place it in the week? How often do you place it in the week? Is it at the elbow where there's a ton of repetitions there, and maybe we want to give that a break, vice versa? So that's essentially at the macro level how we think about programming. Those are the two big ones. We will be taking this down to much deeper detail for all of you Urban Movement licensees, but to give you guys at least a good enough idea as to where our mind goes, that's how I'd be thinking of it from a macro perspective. And then, take us over to, when we boil it down and we look at it like when we zoom in on a micro perspective. Yeah,
and so then we get into, we have these movements, or at least we have our theme of our movement patterns. Then we can get more specific on how we're going to apply our tempos. And so we have those four styles we do. So absolute strength endurance, hypertrophy, and absolute speed. And each one has kind of rules to go along with how that tempo is going to be prescribed and where those tempos apply in that movement.
And I'm going to cut you off there. This is where I think so much of the beauty and the art of our program really exists, in the fact that we actually have dose response. We actually have intended results for those days, whether it's absolute strength endurance, hypertrophy, or absolute speed. We do have these elements. And any of you guys who have gone through higher level education protocols, OPEX, or maybe you have your CSCS, or whatever maybe you have from an academia perspective on strength and conditioning, you'll recognize these dose responses and these goals. And this is what we've broken down to, we really think fit in best with our builds, sprints, and grinds. Now, like you said, the guts of how long the tempos are and in which situations and which movements, again, we won't be discussing that on the podcast. That's theory that we'll get into deeper with licensees. Let me just ask you personally, which dose response is your favorite in a workout?
Hypertrophy.
Hypertrophy.
Yeah.
So
or strength endurance.
Okay. Yeah. I'm probably in that like strength endurance grind type scenario. Yeah. Just slap a long workout up there and give me some antagonist movements back to back and allow me just to kind of grind through it. It's what would you say from a consumer perspective? What does the consumer like the most?
I think people who have been here for a while, I think absolute speed is a big time favorite, but it's also one they really love to hate.
Sure, the sprint days.
Yeah. Sprint days. And I think same thing with strength endurance, because it's one to where they walk out of here and they feel immediately like, holy shit, like I just got a really good workout in.
Yeah.
Like I feel awesome.
Yeah. And for those of you guys that are, I mentioned earlier, the educated fitness professional folks in the room, they probably get what these mean. Just a real quick crib notes on this. When we're talking absolute strength, you're talking heavier weights, lower rep schemes, chasing strength training, the absolute, strength of your system within that movement protocol. Strength endurance is where we're going ahead and we're applying tempos and rep schemes are going to be longer, that are going to fatigue you out, and you're really training this. CrossFitters really get this. Like that was, when CrossFitters would do muscular endurance, and they would, a high volume of toes to bar followed by a high volume of pull-ups to test that grip strength endurance type scenario. But strength endurance would be something very similar to our grinds. Hypertrophy, obviously those of you guys in the bodybuilding community, the development and recruitment of new muscle fibers by overloading them. And then absolute speed, which is exactly as it sounds. This is your go fast, Energizer Bunny type scenario. How quickly can we go and maintain top optimal speed? But those are our tempo selections. So after we've zoomed in here, we're looking at this, And then we need to go ahead, and this is probably the trickiest part, is figuring out the total time under tension that you want to have for those individuals. Not knowing which individuals you're talking about, not knowing which days they're coming in, not knowing any of their prerequisite injuries, that all these things that you would know in an individual programming or a personal training scenario. So at a high level, what are some of the things you're thinking of when you're looking at these total time under tension elements?
Yeah, so I think that's the biggest key when we're programming these workouts. So by kind of sitting there and figuring out, hey, how long is this set of front squats going to take us? Now I can look into this and start figuring out how many rounds I can expect people to get through within an interval. So then it helps narrow down which intervals we're going to pick with, right? I mean, I'm not going to do 60 seconds of squats in a 4-minute interval because I'm not going to create enough time.
25% of the workout.
Yeah, it just becomes a very boring workout for them to where they're like, dude, I did like 1 round and that was it.
Yeah.
Calculating that out and figuring out where this needs to be then helps us narrow down our interval selection.
Yeah, and what's interesting here on the time under tension totals too is when you guys are looking at picking these movements and pairing them with different tempos, and however you do your programming, whether it's our way or any other way, you do realize when you go with tempo training, that's the benefit is you actually can say, okay, I hypothesize that in a 8-minute round, this many rounds will be accomplished because I know the reps. I know how long the reps take. Like we're able actually to quantify because if the tempo is blah, 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 it's 3 second down, 2 second hold, 3 seconds up. 3, 2, 3. I know that's sitting at least 8 seconds a rep. And we also know that the average client's going to take a few extra seconds at the top of each rep, and they're going to add seconds to it, which is when you really get experience in this is what you figure out, that your perfect math that you work out on the whiteboard doesn't always work out in real life. But you're able to start figuring out exactly how much TUT you want at the end of a round, and then we can backtrack into how many rounds we think the average person's going to get. And by capping, because we do everything based on time, right? Like you're going to move for X amount of minutes. We're able to put a very tight parameter around the total time under tension, unlike a 4-time workout, where someone, is going to blaze through that damn thing as quick as possible. And
we tried that.
Yeah, we did.
There were times that we went with that to where it was like, hey, we're going to go 5 rounds for time, and each round I want you to get faster. And 2 people nobody got fucking faster.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest key on this is when I can sit down and figure out the total time under tension, I now have so much more control of how fast I want people to go. Like if I want somebody to go 80%, I can make a tempo to where they can't move any faster than that. They can't cycle reps through any faster than I want them to go. To where instead of now being like, hey, I want everybody to go 70%. Most of them, they don't know what 70% feels like. They know this is slow, this is fast. That's all I know.
Yeah. This is for some of you guys that maybe been thinking about programming in other ways. Hopefully this has maybe helped give you a little bit of an unlock or at least an insight as to how we do things at Urban Movement, how Deuce has kind of constructed this entire process and kind of what goes on in his head as he's, chilling on the couch in his sweatpants on a Sunday. But next up, what we're going to go ahead and do in this video is we're going to actually break out in a sample week, an entire week of programming, and just, kind of know what was going through our head based on these criteria when we created that. So that's this right here.